Oi. So, how have y'all's day been going? Popcorn was involved, I heard. RPG playtesting was also involved, I heard. Yeah. So, this is session 0 for our upcoming D&D 5e campaign. Now, I have a checklist of things that we can go through and decide how we want to run them for the upcoming game. As Eric has homework. He will not be here. I am going to send him the recording of this afterward, and then he can, if his schedule is going to allow him to join, then he can join the Discord and he can give feedback on whether he really wants a certain thing to change, and we can maybe look at that, or whether he's like, yeah, cool, I signed the contract, I agree to the things, and we're like, that's the right boy. Yeah. So I have no preconceived ideas of stuff going into this game. If any of you have feedback, things you want to do, things you really don't want to do after the last campaign, things you've been wanting to do in campaigns and you really want the chance to do it now, please tell me, and I'm sure that we can accommodate. Does anyone have anything they want to add at the very beginning? Well, then the first thing on the list is earning experience. I am happy to continue to do milestone. Does anybody particularly want to do experience instead of milestone? All right. Lovely. Leveling up. When do PCs level up? I generally prefer this to be on a long rest. I like the idea of the verisimilitude of requiring downtime for it. I'm happy to do whatever you guys want to do in this regard. For leveling up. Like, you can't level up until you've taken a week. I mean, I would be happy to just say you level up when you finish the long rest. Yeah. Well, some people like they like the kind of pacing of everybody separates and does their hardcore training for a week, and when you come back, like, hey guys, I can't wait to show you the new thing I've been practicing, because it's like all anime and stuff, and it's like the thing that happens between books. But you know, we are playing D&D and not writing a book, I suppose, so that's not, I suppose, the most necessary thing. That is also fun. For on that note of long rests, I would prefer to do the schedule of you get no HP back by default on a long rest, but all of the other resting schedule remains the same. You take your short rests and your long rests as they are in the PHB. Half your hit dice back on a long rest. What do you guys think of that? No HP back at all on a long rest. You have to spend your magic or your hit dice or your whatever else you have. Yes. And abilities that say that they recharge on a short rest, I prefer doing on a long rest also. I know there's a very slight amount of balance that shifts there, but it feels really counterintuitive to me. So I would be happy to say short rest abilities also refill on long rests. If wild shape is something you don't normally get on a long rest, then yes. Yeah. The practically what I am saying that you could ordinarily take your 1 hour short rest and then an 8 hour long rest. I'm saying you can just count your first hour of a long rest as a short rest, is all. Am I being really confusing, not making sense, or am I not getting what other people are saying? Okay. Also, yes. What did it sound like I was saying? Oh, no, not at all. No. Just, I find it really weird that a thing can come back if you spend an hour, but doesn't come back if you spend 8 hours. So I'm pretty sure they don't. I'm pretty sure there are many abilities that refer to only a short rest and some that refer to a short or a long rest. No, it doesn't. That's why I prefer it doing it this way. All right. Were there anything other things regarding long rests? I do not have a downtime system for learning new stuff in mind. If one of you wants to suggest a system for that, then we can probably implement it. I know there are a couple different systems suggested in the various books, and there are also homebrew solutions for that. Do any of you have suggestions? All right. Okay. I don't have anything in mind at the moment. We can come back to that after when we're doing setting stuff. George, do you have any suggestions on that? I can't hear you. Oh no, George is suffering both the silenced and deafened conditions. Well, he was deafened just a moment ago. I'm sorry that you guys continue to have so many tech issues. Okay. Gotcha. If you can hear us, George, if you can send answers to text chat, that is also workable. Thank you. Player secrets, player versus player, and generally making dice rolls to influence other players' characters. How do we feel about that? rather metagaming in the right direction. Metagaming that, you know, Boromir taking the ring when his character is going to, you know, die at the end of the session anyway can make for a really dramatic moment. All right, Stephanie and George, what do you think? Okay. The idea of the secrets, as we're talking about, are players keeping secrets from other players. So, for example, your character is the classic example is the paladin who's secretly like an evil rogue. The classic example is he goes through the whole campaign and none of the other players ever know that he's actually evil, and then he kills everybody at the last session. We're asking, would we rather have players are allowed to keep secrets from other players rather than their characters, or should information generally be open and have the expectation that people are helping each other to play out their character arcs, even though their characters don't know the secrets? Having a lot of game knowledge doesn't mean that you can't have a preference. And it... Yep. And George is typing. Okay. The... I think what we could go forward with is the understanding that it's okay for players to have secrets, and I mean the understanding that people will be mature if they do learn another person's secrets and not metagame with it in a way that's disruptive to the game. I think we all wouldn't do that anyway. If that seems fair. All right. I mean, you're certainly not forced to keep secrets from other people, but what about dice rolls and PvP rolls against each other? Is your character allowed to try to lie to another character in game? Are you is Jordan's character allowed to try to deceive George's character in game through a dice roll rather than through roleplay? The difference, I suppose, would be if it's purely role-playing, then George, the player, has to consent to his character being persuaded by the roll. Well, if it's the roll, then you just do what the die tells you. And George, what do you think? Yeah. Okay. And Stephanie, I think you mentioned what you thought George would want. I can't remember, even though it was 2 seconds ago. What would you prefer? Okay. Well, one person has a strong opinion, two people effectively don't care. So we will do players are allowed to try to mechanically impact each other. Are we on that same line okay with PvP? Is your character allowed to try to murder another character if something happens in game that they don't like? Yay! Excellent. Well, yeah. But we're not going to have a table where the rogue absolutely is not allowed to try to pickpocket anybody under any circumstances. All right. Sounds good to me. Yeah. Friends make the best enemies. What about player and character agency? How much are you expecting that there are certain aspects of your character that will not be taken away from you? For example, I mean, it's one thing if I killed Potato Orphan. The Potato Orphan was, given to you halfway through the campaign. What if I had someone steal the wizard spellbook and burn it, and you had no opportunity to get it for half the campaign? Would that be okay if... I mean, a lot of this boils down to, is it okay to take permanent things away from you if there's a good reason for it? Even Potato Orphans. All right, sounds like we're pretty much agreed on that. Yes. Yep. You don't want me to be able to force you to suddenly be a good guy because the good angel came down to you in your sleep and forced you to no longer be a warlock. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I think so. Um, what about things like your character getting permanently possessed by, I don't know, a floating brain or something? Are you fine with just treating that as a character death, shrugging and going, I guess I get a new character? Or um, especially if it's something that's easier to get to than a death. For example, Wendellorn getting turned to stone. That happened in like one or two rolls. That's a little less forgivable than having a character die in combat. Is that okay with you guys in a game like this? Or what if you got like turned into a lycanthrope and like every night you might lose control of your character for the next 3 days? Not the like Wendellorn getting turned to stone. Yeah. Yep. You know, right. And I can say just I try to be a good faith GM generally. I try not to just screw people over and be adversarial for the sake of it. Um, generally, I am not a huge fan of trying to completely take away agency from characters. So I can just say that if you have a problem with something that I do in that regard, we can talk about it. And like I am literally fine with doing a minor retcon to turning a catastrophic, horrible, unfair thing into a less catastrophic, terrible thing that can be reversed. Well, yeah, I have many justifications for that, but I'm still sorry. I have a giant chart that explains why it was okay for me to kill the Potato Orphan. Game balance and fairness. How do we feel about the GM fudging dice? How do we feel about the GM sticking to as close to an idea of good balance as possible? How do we feel about the GM adjusting the world around you to try to better fit your characters? Yeah. I will say that I used to fudge the dice a lot more. I do that less often now. Um, what I tend to do more in line of fudging is if someone gets the giant guy with a million health down to like literally two, I tend to just push that over and kill it. Um, but I'll keep that in mind. It is, we consider it generally okay um, to make a better story than to be a slave to the dice. Rules debates. Generally, when we're looking at a rules question for the last campaign, I have made a ruling that is sometimes proper, sometimes not, and usually asked poor Jordan to look up the rule for me. What do we want to have the procedure be going forward for that? Yep. Yeah. I prefer to stay to rules as in, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. If you made a mechanical decision with long-term consequences based on something that isn't working how we thought it would work, then you absolutely can respec for free. If it was just you made a bit of a decision that you don't like now as much now that you've done it, then you're probably going to need to do it during downtime. But if it's like, oh, I chose this feat because it absolutely looks like you can attack someone with a polearm with Sentinel, I'm like, no, you can only do it within 5 feet because that's what the feat says. Then yeah, you could take a different feat. But in general, my rulings tend to err on the side of more player agency than less. I try to stay to rules as intended. A lot of the rules as intended is pretty dumb, and we tend to do a lot of homebrewing regarding that. As long as you guys are fine with staying with that, I'm happy to continue doing that. Popcorn. How do we feel about popcorn? I like popcorn. Popcorn. Yeah. It is true. Indeed. I bought multiple giant cartons of the Flavacol salt they use at movie theaters. I'm sure it's terrible for me, but it's so tasty. Oh yes, I ran out a long time ago. I need to get more. They might have some at the spice shop. I don't know. Ooh, thank you for letting me know. I can hear you now. Yay! I'm happy to have you back, George. How do we generally want to deal with meta knowledge? The classic example being, well, none of you guys know what a troll is, even though all of you players know that trolls are weak to fire, so I'm just going to sit back and have a fun time watching you spend 3 hours in combat with this troll, running through all your different options until you hit it with fire, and then realize that you can hit it with fire. This is another good faith GM thing. I generally am not going to throw things at you where it's just annoying waiting for your characters to have a reason for knowing what to do. I would rather just say, oh yeah, you guys, because you live in a culture where adventuring is a thing, you have some knowledge of this thing, and you can figure out the meta knowledge thing. Yeah. Yes. But where do we want to draw the line for that? We can go back to that same one example. The trolls. The only way you are going to kill them is if you burn them. If none of your characters know that, then I'm being a dick sending you to fight a bunch of trolls. There could be assuming that I'm not doing some kind of a justifiable narrative thing, like just trying to get you to run away from them. Where is the line? Okay. Yeah. Like I do some kind of a good storytelling thing and set up the thing before you need to do the thing. Right. So the answer is be a good GM in in general. Yep. I just shouldn't. I will tell you now, I am not going to sit down to the encounter and have the expectation that you're going to spend 3 hours pretending to not know something with the intention, not that you're going to run from it, not that you're going to find some creative thing with it, but with the intention that you are going to run through literally every other thing you have before one of you can justify using the thing. If that makes any sense. If there's a meta requirement, then it's not going to be annoying. Min-maxing. How are we feeling about character optimization? Are we going to say... I mean, I would prefer to say you're not going to take lucky or the -5 to hit plus 10 damage feats. And that's more or less as far as I would go with it. I am generally happy to let people make character and class combinations that are really, really good at specific things and just adjust the game around that. Dump stats are cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If we get up to that point, then we could look at putting them back in or just having another homebrew that makes them a little better. I mean, I would be happy just throwing lots more dice onto two-handed weapons myself, but yeah. George, what do you think? Yep. And I feel like there was one more feat, maybe, that I wasn't a fan of, but those are the three. We could talk more about later. More about later? We could talk more about specific other feats later. But in general, I don't mind character optimization stuff. I'm not going to like require that all of your feats cannot be combat feats or something. Character party fit. I would request that you guys talk to each other about the characters that you're making. I would I guess this would be a good time to say what level do we want to start at. I would be happy to start at level 3. I feel like that's the best place to start a campaign that isn't specifically a high-level campaign. Yeah, I am really not a fan of high-level D&D. We can run the campaign into higher levels if that's what you guys want. I would strongly prefer not to start there, though. Yeah. Starting at 3rd level, you guys each will have some adventuring history before now. I would ask that each of you have had some contact with the others at some point in your adventuring career previous, if you are not like actively good friends or allies or whatever at the moment. And I would prefer that you have some kind of connection to at least one NPC out there in the world that we might be able to work in at some point, and that you let me know. You have other thoughts on these? What about you, George? Okay, thank you. Now we can't exactly know how a campaign will go up to this point, but is there a level we want to target ending at? The absolute upper level that I wouldn't want to go any further than is 15. I know I tend to end around 6th level. I would be happy to I would be happy to push outside of my comfort zone and plan to go up to like 10 or 11 and then see where we go from there. I also don't know how long we plan on playing this campaign. It could end up being a giant dragon. We want to do something else at some point, but I'm not planning on that at the moment. Understandable. What do you think, George? Yeah. Okay. I will not actively plan to end at 6 this time, is what I can promise. Yep. Yes. Yes. Yep. Right. Very fair. How do we feel about murder hobo-iness and evil characters? I, as a GM, am perfectly happy to have evil characters in a campaign so long as the evil is not intended to be manifested as being a stupid dick and disrupting everything all the time. My favorite alignment is neutral evil. I love characters who plot world domination while supporting their allies and friends and inspiring their minions. But that's not necessarily what everyone thinks of when they think of evil characters. Do we want to set some kind of an expectation just on the off chance someone joins us halfway through or something? Like, please don't be Deadpool. Is that a bar that we can set? Yes, certainly. It does depend on if they're an orphan or not. The guy standing next to him was the real. Well, I mean that was probably for the best. Like in the long run, I don't know. It did make it much less interesting though. So yeah, I would prefer if you didn't kill the guys who are gonna ruin everything. But you know, that's just me as the DM. That poor guy. I forgot about him. Yep. Yes. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Right. Yeah, no keeping secrets from the DM. That is. Yes. Uh, okay. That sounds like we have a good baseline of don't be a dick IRL, and that can probably go for almost every one of these questions. Good. Sounds good. DM style, I already mentioned I prefer rules as intended. I am very happy to play fast and loose when it's going to make things when it's going to make things happen that I think are more fun. The problem is I don't always think the same things are fun as everyone else. So if you have a problem with a ruling that I made, please bring it up. I am not going to hold so strongly to what I want that I'm going to make other people not have fun doing it. I want everyone to have fun. Um, hmm, yes. Yes. Reasonable. Yep. Yep. Yes. Yep. Yeah. I generally strongly do not want to give someone character features for free. I can unthinkingly move in the opposite of that direction on the table because I'm just thinking of what's cool instead of what's reasonable. But yeah, that is a very good point. What's that? I need to say no more often, and I need to specifically. I think a lot more try to keep people to being able to use the skills they are not proficient in a lot less. Um, that's something that I've been trying to do for the last few campaigns, and I've just not thought about it too hard. Like, there, even if it just falls into things like helping. Um, Sometimes I'll let someone help with medicine, even if they have no business helping with medicine. George, what are your thoughts on this? Yep. Mm. All right. Then I will try to cleave to reasonability. And if I make an allowance that doesn't seem too reasonable, you are more than welcome to raise a question like, "Oh, do you have the feature that lets you do that?" If you absolutely otherwise need a feat to do it, um, and we can make a ruling then. Um, Player absences. Since we have like three people and me playing, I'm not a person, you see. Potentially Eric. If we have four people, then depending on the circumstance, I am happy to play with only three. If we only have three people to begin with, then one person being gone is probably going to be a we skip to next week. What do you guys think about that? Yeah, 3 persons in Taylor. That doesn't make me feel better, but thank you. Play. Oh, thank you. That makes me feel better. Player narrative authority. Are players allowed to have some narrative authority in the game? Are players allowed to contribute to the world building if they feel like it? For example, can the cleric player make up their deity? This is something I actively welcome. I love when players want to add elements to the world and to the story. I would love it if every one of my players did that like every session. I can't even keep track of the things that I put in, so it's not like it would be disrupting too much. What do you guys think? Like what? Like, oh, I had this gold chest here the entire time. Yeah. Yep. Right. Yeah, absolutely. DM always can say no. I just personally never do. I need to do that more often. But like generally, if I had no mention of dinosaurs previously, I'd be perfectly fine with the character saying like, oh yeah, a dinosaur ripped me freaking eye out. I'd be like, neat, dinosaurs exist. But I suppose there are limits. George, what do you think? Okay. Sounds good. Let's see. Pet peeves and issues that came up in the last campaign or even before that. Are there things that we really don't want to do in this campaign that we were doing before? That's fair. All right, guys, we are playing the goats of Saltmarsh. You see. There probably are newt-newts, yes. Yeah, we're not gonna do that this time. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And to go along with that and our previous discussion, if a character asks to use a different skill and it seems moderately reasonable, I'm generally happy to work with that. Like, if it is a deceivy kind of performance, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to use deception for it. And a big frustration I had in the Dracula's America game is Jameson was supposed to be like a street preacher, so he had fat stacks of performance and nothing in religion, and I kept having to make religion checks when I was preaching to people. And granted, that created some very funny situations. It wouldn't have been nearly as interesting if he'd actually succeeded any single time he tried it. But it was frustrating. So yeah, I can see that. Yes. He did some wisdom saves, yes. um, as far as I, as a GM, am concerned, a player using the role-playing mechanics built into the game to make decisions in character is fine. But certainly, Stephanie and George, if you have different opinions, please share them. Yep. Yeah. You know, there are some very fancy board game conferences and events and stuff where you are explicitly not allowed to randomly determine your actions using dice or other methods of random determination. What people do is they use an analog wristwatch and they use the position of the second hand to determine stuff. And like, oh, I was just looking at my watch, bro. It saves brain power in the long run. It's funny. But it sounds like we're fine with it if someone wants to do it. Yeah. Now, I have been at the table with the character who always plays a guy with two personalities who is always, as a player, role-playing as Two-Face and is flipping a coin for every single thing. That is really annoying, but that's also disruptive. Imposing checks on yourself to see if you want to do something doesn't seem inherently disruptive to me. Right. On the internet, nobody knows that you're a Two-Face. So let's see. Character creation in general. Creation stats. I generally am fine with people using any of the standard methods of stat generation. I just ask that if you do roll, you do it in front of me. No matter how much I trust you, no matter how much I have known you in real life, that's just what I ask. And what we do is roll 4d6, drop the lowest for each one. You only get one set of it. We're not doing Aaron's unholy abomination that gives you ridiculous stats. It's kind of nice if you want to play a game that just has all the stats cranked up, which I guess is fine. It just offsets the balance a bit, which just means you're going to be fighting things that are a little bit stronger. Well, I am perfectly happy for people to point by. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah. There's no reason why my character should have the stats he does, but yeah. Oh gosh. Interesting. So how do you guys, does anybody not like that? Anybody not like the ability to do whichever of the ones they want? Or yes. Especially when people can get a magic item that lets them boost their main stat up to 20 anyway. Which is probably not something you guys are going to be finding in this campaign, by the way. But, I mean, unless we get up to, like, level 15. I don't know. Alignment is something I don't bother with because there are no mechanical repercussions for alignment aside from, like, one magic item or whatever. This isn't like in previous editions where your alignment determines which class you can be, which race you can be, how different factions interact with you, and this and that. So if you want to have alignment on your sheet, you are more than welcome to, but I basically ignore it because the game does. Do any of you feel like that should be taken more into consideration? We should homebrew some kind of alignment thing. Unless someone wants to have this other classic dimension of the game back again, in which case that's something we could potentially look at. But yeah. That's fair. Yeah. But yeah, its heyday was 3.5. I don't know how much. I mean, I know in NetHack it was hugely meaningful, but I don't know how much of that was actually based on the AD&D of the time. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Then that's something we will just continue ignoring, unless you want it on your character sheet, in which case you're allowed to do that. Yes. Yeah. Cool. So, racial options and background options. I am perfectly happy with using the customization options in Tasha's, etc. If you want your background to have features from a different background, just talk to me and we'll figure it out. You can swap your proficiencies for different things. You can ignore whatever stat bonuses your race would give you and get +1 to 2 stats or +2 to 1. If you want to swap out your stat bonus for another racial thing that seems like it'd be interesting, we can talk about that. In general, if you want a homebrew or Unearthed Arcana thing, please talk to me and we can figure it out. Do you guys have thoughts on that? Would you rather not do that? Or do something different? Okay. We don't have any campaign things in mind, so I don't have a reason to limit like classes or races for the sake of that. I'm certainly not banning any classes or races because I think they're overpowered. I would say if you're not using a core book, please ask me about it. I mean, I would like to know your character concept ahead of time anyway, and I hope that you're talking among yourselves about the characters that you are going to make because you're building your party. I would... No. I'm going to say no, none of the magic races. I mean, if you want to be a magic race in particular, ask me. I don't love the idea of people being this Simics or whatever they are. I know magic. I should know what they are. The guys who have all the body parts. Like, I love the body horror. I love the body horror, but they're a little overpowered. And on the same token, I would strongly prefer no changelings. But like, Loxodon and Warforged are cool. You can be those. Okay. Let's see. I mean, that would be really cool. I just don't want it in my game. However, I am very happy with you tweaking and reflavoring all sorts of stuff. I mean, based on the very first character, Aaron asked me if he could play. Yes. That was a stupid character. It was and then he played Passy. And it was my fault because I didn't look at the character sheet hard enough. If you want to tweak or reflavor race, class, anything stuff, please ask me. I'll probably say cool. I mean, you remember I was perfectly happy with Chris playing a tiefling who was actually an imp, who was, much smaller than a regular tiefling. After I said you can't be a tiefling, but we made it work. and it ended up being a good world building thing that I'm happy that we allowed. Any thoughts on that? All right. Are we look? I mean, I would be perfectly okay with that if they were magic summon guns. Like it changes nothing, so please do. Our how sandboxy do we want to go? How railroady do we want to go? Last campaign was, though I had pitched it as more sandboxy, it ended up not at all being that. I know a couple of you expressed that you were perfectly fine or actively happy with the level of railroading. Do you have any further thoughts, Nell, on that? I will say that my general, even sandbox style is I would rather shape things that happen around where you guys are rather than have an encounter over here that waits for you guys to come interact with it. I need to get better at. Well, I won't say I need to get better. Sometimes you guys will walk away from something and something will happen, and then you guys come and interact with it later. And unfortunately, it was long enough ago that nobody has any idea what it was. And I need to get better at making it clear that things are happening, and I need to make it better known that things are connected, and that like clues matter and stuff. The clock is always ticking. Those poor orphans. That applies to several campaigns. Yep. Yeah. I will say, as I loudly said many times in that last session of Errands you were playing, after nothing happening for long enough, I would absolutely just have terrorists break in. Does that sound okay? Despite them having not been planned at all ahead of time. And I need to get better at not telling people when I don't have plans. I need to make it sound like everything was all according to plan. Just... Yes. George, what are your thoughts? Understandable. Oh, you cut off for me, George. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Do you have any preferences for what your roles and expectations as adventurers are? Like, last campaign, there were pretty much no expectations on you aside from you guys showing up and people being like, oh, people are alive. I can have someone do the thing for me, or I can feed them cake or whatever. Like, is it expected that you're going to be hailed down like witchers to go murder the guy in the village because that's kind of your job? Is it you're just random guys in the world and you happen to be stumbling into danger? Are there lots of other adventurers in the world like you guys? This is a very weird question. Well, lots of people have different opinions on how they like to interact with the world in that way. They have tiny little cards they keep in their wallets. Yep. What do you... Yes. Yep. What do you think, George? Yep. Understandable. And you don't have strong opinions on it, Stephanie? Okay. Then there will be other adventures then. Yay. And you'll be recognized as adventurers if you go adventuring. Are you fine with me telling you that you guys are already together at the start of the game, or do you want me to try to convince you all to work together in session 1? Okay. That sounds good to me. Right. We already talked about feats. Everybody gets a feat at level 1. You cannot be a variant human, and you cannot take those few feats that we mentioned. That is all. Yes. Yeah. Mounts and pets. How are we going to handle this? Do we set out ahead of time with... we know that there are going to be attempts made to get lots of pets. That's just one of the fundamental rules of D&D. I am going to say I will assume pets are not going to be players in combat, is what I would prefer. If you get pets, I'll probably just every once in a while ask you to throw some money at feeding them and housing them, and you can pet them all you want. What do you guys think? Basically. All right. Yes. Yep. If you try to push them into danger, and they'll run away. All right. And if any of you want to buy mounts, we'll use the mounted combat rolls. They're pretty simple. The biggest dumb thing with them is that if you make an attack, you cannot move and then make another attack while you're mounted, because your mount technically gets a separate turn that it uses its movement on. Yes. That is a very good question. We'll get to that in 1 second. Do you guys have any other feedback on pets and animals? Yes. Okay. I would absolutely like to take a look at that. Thank you. Yep. Right. Okay. We'll. I'm happy to take a look at it. We won't worry about it being the rules we're going to use unless somebody decides to use it. But I would happy to take a look at it. Thank you. Yes. What was the thing we were just going to go into? Gold. Yes. Okay. So this is going to depend somewhat on the world that we're going to do. How do we want to handle money and economy? Are you like the basic assumption in D&D is that magic items are uncommon, you get them very infrequently, and it's very hard to sell them, even harder to buy them, and there are no set prices for them. Are we thinking that we want a game where you're going to be getting magic items relatively frequently, like you're going to are we going to have an Eberron-ish game where you can probably go out and buy the magic item you want and you can probably sell the magic item you want? Or is it going to be a thing that you get very infrequently and need to hunt down the creepy old man who maybe will offer you an okay price for it, but is probably going to give you something weird in exchange for it, like the deed to his house, instead of money? Yep. What about you, Stephanie? All right, I am perfectly happy with that. Sounds good. Readying an action normally does not allow you to multi-attack. I'm happy with readying an attack, meaning you can multi-attack. What do you guys think? Ordinarily, if you prepare an attack, you can only make one attack, regardless of how many attacks you can make during your normal turn. I am happy with homebrewing it, so if you prepared an attack and you can make two attacks, you can make two attacks with your prepared attack. Yeah. Yeah. On that note, if someone wants to play a sorcerer, then I am happy with you playtesting Jordan's new sorcerer. Yay! Jordan's made a good sorcerer. The other sorcerer that exists is not good. Jordan has made a really cool sorcerer. It may be a good sorcerer, but it's really cool. Repeated and grouped party rolls. In general, I would prefer not to ask people to roll until someone gets success. I would rather say if you failed, then it takes you a lot longer, or some kind of unforeseen consequence was introduced. What do you guys feel about that? Yes. Yeah. If you were never going to break your lockpick, if there's never any consequence for failing, then why am I asking you to roll 30 times in a row? What do you think, George and Stephanie? Yeah. Yeah. If I would usually, um, yeah, I think that's a different kind of way that I'd look at failure. I think that there would be different circumstances for that. There are certain locks that either I would tell someone, yeah, there's no way that you can get this open, or I'm letting them roll so that because their character isn't bright enough to know they couldn't figure it out, but they're never going to get it open anyway. I mean, if someone only could possibly succeed if they rolled a natural 20, I wouldn't consider that to be a thing where they roll until they succeed. No. Yep. Right. Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah. And there's a certain point where Rogue and Bard just kind of break down. That I'm not entirely sure why expertise made it into the game. It breaks the fundamental basic philosophy on which the entire rest of the game is built. If it was like a high level feature Rogue got to do one thing in, I could get it, but like they really like expertise, don't they? Um hmm. Yeah. I don't know what the sages were smoking, but I guess there's a reason they're the sages. Um any more thoughts on that, Stephanie or George? The okay. General consensus I think is no, you can't just roll until you do it. Either you can't do it or there's going to be a downside to it. Inspiration was something that basically didn't exist on our last campaign. I've never hugely been a fan of give inspiration for good role playing. When I've tried to do it, it usually just turns into I give inspiration to the person who makes me laugh, and that is not at all fair. It is nice to have inspiration. I would be happy for everyone to start with inspiration. Maybe you get a point when you level up or something, like very infrequent. Does anyone have other suggestions? We could also do microtransactions. You send me $5 and I give you inspiration. That is an interesting idea, considering that we're not doing experience. That could be a way to have even though you guys are physically beaten down into the ground, you feel inspired by the big thing. What do the other two of you think about that? Yeah. It's a why are we rolling dice at a certain point? Yeah. What do you think, George? Okay, then that's what we'll do once per level, and you get one at the beginning. And I am happy with you spending your inspiration on other players. I'm happy with you in general. If a there are many features in the game that say, like, oh, you have to use this ability to change the result of the dice before you know if it succeeds. I think that's really dumb and doesn't work in practice because people don't have the timing of a professional Magic player. If you have an ability that lets you modify a roll, I am happy with you using it whenever. We can even retcon 5 seconds, so long as we're like doing the same thing. And inspiration is one of those things. Let's see, critical hits, no fumbles. You can't crit on a skill check. You crit on your attacks. We'll just do regular crits. Your dice steal double dice. Your attacks steal double dice. Something like that. Unless you guys would prefer to do something else. Do you have other preferences? You roll a second time and add together. Which is the way that it is in the base game. I like lots of different crit things, but I can never remember which I'm doing if I'm not doing the base game. No critical fumbles. You can still crit fail, but bad things don't happen to you because you had the misfortune of rolling more attacks. Yeah. Though I find fumbles really fun, they're not fun to do. I've even desperately thought about trying to homebrew a thing where like only the first attack you make on a turn can crit fumble, but still the spellcasters are in a better place than the marshals because they've got so many things that don't require attack rolls. So that's still not fair. Marshals don't need to be even worse than the casters already are. George, what are your thoughts? All right. And on the same sort of token, we did a modified flanking in the last campaign where it gives you advantage on your damage dice. I always forgot to tell people to do it. I thought it worked well the few times that we did it. What do you guys think? Normally it does nothing because it's an optional rule in the DMG. The common usage of it is if you're flanking, you get advantage to hit, and that is kind of broken. So yeah. So many abilities in the game key off of you having advantage, and that is a really, really, really easy way to get advantage. When otherwise you need to hide or you need to use a class feature that gives you a disadvantage on something else in exchange for having advantage in your attacks or something. Yes. I find it really fun, but it really does imbalance the game even further in the direction of more combatants. That's fair. Yep. Oh, really? For some reason, I thought it was just advantage. Yes. Interesting. Yep. An advantage, if you will. Yep. That's much closer to what it was in 3.5, which is the thing they were trying to move away from, but in this case, kind of backfired on them. Yeah. Well, there's a reason it wasn't actually in the game. Yeah. Yep. Two blind guys trying to hit each other have the same chance as two seeing guys trying to hit each other. I am perfectly happy to do +1 as a flanking bonus. That sounds really cool to me. Does anybody not want to do it? Cool. Stealth. I don't know how to run stealth properly in this game. Stealth doesn't work amazingly in this game. I generally ask people to run from one piece of cover to another if they're gonna stealth. I generally say you can't just keep popping out of the same hole and expect to keep being hidden, but I hand wave a lot of stealth mostly because I just expect the rogue is getting his sneak attack every turn. That's usually what it boils down to. Mm-hmm. Ooh. Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. That is so beautifully elegant. It makes me wonder how these are the same people who worked on the base game. Like, how did this happen in a published Wizards of the Coast book? Come on. That's the kind of thing you get from, like, YouTubers with 3 gajillion patron followers or whatever, who are just snorting so many lines of coke and G Fuel every night to come up with this stuff. Yeah, if someone wants to take that from Tasha's, there. Was that from Tasha's or was that from an Unearthed Arcana? Okay, yeah, if someone wants to take that, or like lots of the other stuff from Tasha's, just ask me first and you can do that. Yeah. Let me see, what was the thing I was just going to say? Traps and puzzles, I tend not to use them much. Would you guys prefer I run more traps and puzzles? Well, I don't want to is the problem. but it's a part of the core D&D experience. If people are irritated that I don't run them, then I can try to work them in more. Yeah. Why is my character not solving this puzzle instead of me? Because it's a quick time event, but with my brain. Then how do you expect me to? George, what are your... Yes. Oh, that's a good point. I shouldn't have told you. George, what are your thoughts? Oh no. I'm sorry. Just I said I don't care for running puzzles and traps. I said, what do you guys think? And they said Jordan doesn't like puzzles. Aside from that, more or less ambivalence. What do you think? I believe so. Yeah. Oh no. Okay. Okay. Then we may run some. I'm sorry. Yeah. We may run some traps. Probably not going to run any puzzles. Attunement and identification. I personally think the base rule of magic items in the game that you spend 10 minutes and then you know everything about a magic item is extraordinarily dumb. But what do you guys think? Would you... I like having to go find the creepy old man in the woods who can tell you what the magic wand does. Would you guys massively prefer the convenience of just knowing what the thing is? They have a lot of flavor. I missed what you said, Jordan. Okay, then magic items will probably need identification. And I'll just hope that they don't end up in the bottom of somebody's bag and never, ever, 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 ever get identified. That's fair. Yeah. 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 I suppose the other side of that is, can you attune to a magic item that you don't know how it works? That's probably going to be the direction I more lean. There may be plenty of magic items that do basic things that you can easily figure out and attune to, but I don't know. We may have to just get to that as we get to it, because I don't know what kind of magic items you guys are going to find. On the other hand of that, I am perfectly happy with magic armor and stuff resizing itself to fit you. It's magic. Magic. Weapons are probably not going to transform into completely different weapons on their own, but if you find a magic hat, you can probably wear it. I promise you that Frodo's chainmail was not meant for a hobbit. Whether or not it resized itself is a completely different matter. You guys have any other thoughts on magic items? All right. Magic. I would prefer if Healing Spirits only heals you once outside of combat. That is, like, literally the only magic thing I can think of. I have not, no. Ooh. Excellent. Gotcha. Interesting. All right, then never mind. We're using Healing Spirit as intended. If I could justify it in any other way than the devs literally made the spell too low level on purpose, I'd say we're leveling up Fireball, but you know, that's a sacred cow. The specific spell, Mordenkainen's Sword, is going to be a 5th level spell for our campaign, because it shouldn't be a 7th level spell. That is my one of my two pet peeves of spellcasting now that Healing Spirit works properly. Spellcasting, other things of spellcasting. So by the rules as intended, if you have a spellcasting focus, then you can cast spells with the verbal, somatic, and material components without needing a free hand. But you cannot cast spells that don't have the material component, that only require verbal and somatic. I think that is extraordinarily dumb. I would prefer, in this game, if you have a spellcasting focus in your hand, or that is, if you have another thing you're allowed to do, like it's on your shield because you're a cleric, then you don't need another free hand. That's just you use that for all your spellcasting. Material components. If you decide not to use a focus, then you need to keep track of your material components. And a reminder that you still need to pay the gold cost in town to buy the components to cast your spells that require money. Your focus does not cover the cost of like diamonds and stuff. You can cast an action and a bonus action spell in one turn, regardless of the rules. Yes. Yes. Component pouch can be used as a focus in the same way. Yeah. You can use your two fingers holding whatever's in your other hand to pull out your components. Yep. Do any of you have thoughts on that aside from that? All right. If there is a TPK, I generally prefer to just end the campaign there. Would you guys prefer the campaign like sort of continue but with all new characters? I know some people prefer that. If there's a TPK, some people prefer saying like, oh, 10 years passed and then the new adventurers decided they were going to fulfill the prophecy of, you know, whatever, that legend said that the spirits of the old adventurers would finally get their man, and so that's an excuse to continue the campaign but with different characters. I mean, I suppose that's another question. My general preference is if there's a TPK to just end the campaign there. If absolutely, yeah, play it by ear. I think is kind of a little asterisk you could put onto everything that we're saying here. Do you have any strong preferences there, George? Okay. And in a situation like that, I would probably have you guys make characters of the same level. I I imagine it would be very frustrating to start over as level 3 characters and go all the way through again. We're playing roguelike D&D, boys. That is the end of my list for all of that stuff. Now, we figure out what kind of game we actually want to play. Now that we reached the end game, we can finally play the game. Yeah, do any of you have preferences on kinds of environments you want to be in, kinds of monsters you want to fight, kinds of places you want to explore? We could go back to the same world of the Ozer-Omen campaign in a different time period. We could just do a very generic, I mean, as if that wasn't generic, a kind of Forgotten Realms where I can just ignore most of the actual world building because I don't have to read through the wiki. We could do a completely new world. What are you feeling? No, not at all. We could do Dracula's New Zealand. Right. Right. Yes. Right. Yeah, at the moment I really don't. Um, I can come up with a selection of things and say, hey, which one of these sounds the coolest to you guys? But the main thing at the moment is I am really not looking to do like gigantic amounts of technological world building, I suppose. Of like I don't want to figure out the three world changing vehicles that these people use because they never figured out what airships are. Yeah. George, do you have any preferences? Yeah. Hmm. All right, then I'll come up with a few suggestions and ask you guys what you would prefer. I mean, yes. Yes. Right. Awesome. Thank you guys. That's all the questions that I have for you all. Um, do you have anything more that you want to add or ask before we break? Okay. Yep. Yep. Yes. And I never answered how much gold people have at the beginning of the game. I don't know. I remember never being terribly happy with the amount that they suggest that you start with. Let me look back at the DMG and see what it is. Dumpty dum. Gotcha. There wasn't much of a decision there, I don't believe. It was, I'm going to probably play fast and loose with stealth. I am going to ask that people are, if they're stealthing in combat as a rogue, they're at least running from place to place instead of just trying to hide around the same corner. And Jordan said that in Tasha's, there's a optional rogue feature that lets you just give yourself advantage in exchange for giving up your movement and your bonus action. And I said, well, that would solve lots of things. Your people are welcome to take that if they want. Yeah. They merged a lot of stuff. It gets weird. Right, chapter 5. Equip a monk. Starting at a higher level. Well, what the DMG recommends is that you just have your basic starting stuff if you start at 3rd level. And that doesn't seem like amazing to me. You wanna just add a flat gold bonus onto starting equipment for everyone? What would be a good gold bonus for that? Considering that people are not buying magic items. Yeah. Yeah. Which is a rolled thing, right? Yeah. Yeah. You get some, usually like 15 gold. Yeah. Yeah. I'll say, let's do, you have your starting stuff and then 200 gold. Does that sound fair? All right. And that is what we will do. Thank you guys very much. And I'm going to rename this channel into a generic Spring D&D channel, and then we'll change that when we figure out what campaign we're actually doing. So don't get startled if Abandoned Hope Yell is no longer existent, because it still is. And I'll see you guys when I have some suggestions.